I want to start with the hype around AI for drug development. And as you are really active in the space, I'm wondering what's your take on it?
Yeah, who better to criticize the field than somebody that actually is part of the field? I'll go ahead and do that. Well, definitely, I think I'm not saying anything new when I say that AI is for sure overhyped. And it has been overhyped for years, right? I think actually we're getting to like the moment of truth for a lot of the leaders of the space, who are, of course, many of them are in clinical trials with drugs that they use the AI to help develop and design. And of course, we're learning more about, some claims that were bogus when somebody said, yeah, sure, we'll, just markedly improve the success rates of clinical trials by designing better molecules using AI. Clearly, that's not necessarily going to happen. Using AI for some use cases has been impactful and is already standard practice across biopharma, but it hasn't changed medicine yet. I mean, these technologies haven't changed medicine. And likely, we didn't do ourselves a service in the field by overhyping the whole thing. However, I do think that below the hype, the standard of practice, as I said, like the day-to-day life of drug discovery scientists has been shifting and have been shifting. So I think that's cool to see, actually.
How much do you think the hype comes from the AI drug discovery companies, drug development companies versus the whole AI in general? I mean, the whole ChatGPT and everything.
Surely feed off each other.
The feed there.
Yeah, because if you think about it, I mean, of course, AI in biopharma has been a thing for like maybe 7 to 8 years, really, when companies like
informatics.
Yeah, but of course, fair point, like 20, 30 years ago, AI was a thing, but it was called bioinformatics, and then data science, and then AI. But I think like mid-2010s, of course, companies like really Recursion, Accenture, Atomwise, these guys have started raising their first major rounds, and so people started paying attention. Even Y Combinator started paying attention to Y Combinator, of course, the epitome of technology. Even they started paying attention, and so the hype started growing around AI and biotech around then. But now with ChatGPT around, suddenly everybody is a generative AI company, even the companies that have been around for 10 years and had nothing to do with the technology. So clearly there's a sort of a back and forth cycling of ideas, which is, it's fine, because clearly we're one of the areas, as in, AI in biopharma is one of the areas where really we're largely reusing technological progress in other application areas of AI to our own use cases, and we're learning how to deal with the specialty nature of the data that we train to and the problems that we're trying to predict on, which of course is very difficult. So there's plenty of novel AI being done in biopharma, but really we're learning from other fields, and of course they have an impact on the hype cycle.
Yeah, that's right. And maybe to stay on the hype cycle as well, I mean, you mentioned Recursion, Exscientia, they did a merger, but I think at the market cap for Exscientia that was lower than everything they raised, which at least if I look at it from an observer point of view is a sign that the valuations were too high before, or they were higher before. I think Benevolent AI also didn't work. What's your take on those recent setbacks? Was it just a correction?
Yeah.
Was it set to them?
If you think about it, two things compounded in the valuations of a lot of the front runners of our field. One was the general crazy overheating of the biotech stocks, and of course many of these companies really are ultimately biotech companies, and that's also how they want to position themselves. They develop pipelines of drugs, and they hope to be valued as a biotech company. So there was that sort of boost, as we know, sort of around until the end of 21. Of course, everybody was inflated, or everybody's price was inflated, but that was, I think, further compounded by the fact that, of course, many of us were also looked at, I think almost everybody was looked at as also like a tech company, and so a lot of us front runners got investments from tech investors, which priced us very differently than more traditional biotech investors usually do the platforms that they invest into. And so those two effects combined and really drove the valuation. Recursion was 8 billion plus at one point after the IPO. And so of course that has been most likely corrected to a good extent, and of course is also being depressed just because of the general macro cycle on the market, which is fine. I think what really matters is not the valuations, but more the results of the companies, especially in clinical trials and also in discovery and generally the progress of the pipelines of these companies. And those, of course, have seen some promising results, some good phase fund stuff.
They have phase 2B results now, I think. First efficacy data.
Well, yeah, some efficacy data. Of course, I think especially within silicon recursion, they have reported recent efficacy data. You can read into that whatever you wish, because they want to put a silver lining on that, but it's not yet compelling enough. But of course, also we have to keep in mind that the drug discovery programs that are in the clinical trials of these companies now really came from almost their very first sets of ideas, right? All those years ago when they started out, they made some bets, they chose some programs. I believe the front-running program of Recursion is the one that actually Chris Gibson's PhD was about, just to a great extent, yeah. So it was a repurposing opportunity he identified during his PhD work, as far as I know. And so, clearly, Chris is a wonderful scientist and a brilliant entrepreneur, but like the idea that he had during his PhD may not be the ultimate output of Recursion. So even though there are some setbacks, clearly there's more promising stuff earlier in their pipelines, and we'll have to wait for that. But I think also the setbacks do sort of are a warning sign, or like a cautionary sign that we have to, be mindful of what will come down the pipe later.
I like that also, of like what's coming from a platform. I think it's very similar in biotech, with a biological platform, where usually your first product idea is usually not the best.
More like a POC usually, right? You want to show that this thing even makes sense, and you can get a drug, out of it, or a drug candidate, or a drug-like molecule out of it. And then, of course, you spend more time developing something that is really, really meaningful.